In this tutorial, we'll go ahead and take a look at how to add a rubric into Blackboard. For this demonstration, I'm going to assume that you've already set up a weekly module and you have some type of an assignment set up. Okay? However, if you're not familiar with this idea, you can always go under the Assessments tab, navigate down to Assignment, and add a new assignment. For this example, we'll go ahead and call this Example Assignment Rubric. Because I'm not going to keep this, I'll just say this is an example. Once I've done that, I'll go ahead and I'll scroll down and I'll decide whether or not I want to upload a possible assignment sheet. Normally you will for this. That gives the guidelines and the descriptors for the assignment. We can go through due dates and assign a point value. To keep things simple, I usually put everything on 100 points. And to add a rubric, we can either select a pre-existing rubric, okay, or create new rubrics. In this example, I'll go ahead and create a new rubric so you can see how this works. And once you've selected this, you'll get another window and it'll ask you to name this rubric. So we can call this Rubric Example 2. And you can say what assignment this is for. Below this, you'll see the actual rubric details. And this is where most of the actual work comes into play. You'll see that we have columns which go vertically, and we have rows that go horizontally. Now, we're not actually committed to just having these three options here. These can be renamed in any way that we'd like, but for our example, we'll just stick with these three for now. I'd like to draw your attention to the weighting first. So you'll notice that for these three columns, it has to add up to a total weight of 100%. You can see here that to make that happen, they've set formatting at 33%, organization at 34%, and grammar at 33%. Of course, we could always change this as long as it adds up to 100%. So for instance, we could make the formatting worth 10%. We could, if we look at our total weight, you can actually see that now it doesn't add up to 100%. We could make the organization worth 70%, and we could make the grammar worth 10% or 20%. As long as we add up to 100%, that's what's most important here. The other possibility is that we could always default back and just balance these. In this case, if I push balance, you'll notice that these default back to their original value. You'll also notice that we have the option to reorganize this criteria here. If we push this button, we can actually change the order of any one of these by selecting it and arrowing up or down and then selecting the submit. I won't do that right now. Let's take a look at our rows and columns a little closer. So now we're looking at our levels of achievement. You'll notice that we have novice, competent, and proficient. We can also change the order of these in any way by selecting and moving these around. I'll go ahead and I'll leave this in its default state. Once we get past that, we can also choose to rename any of these names. So maybe you don't want to call yours proficient. Maybe you just want to call it excellent, average, fair. All you would need to do is select the chevron drop-down and select Edit to rename any of these. I'll leave that as it is for now. I also want to draw your attention to the possibility that we could add additional columns and rows. For me, I'm thinking we maybe have proficient, competent, novice. Let's add at least one more column here. Let's call this column, let's call this column fair. And then while we're at it, maybe let's add one more column here and we'll call this deficient. Now you'll notice that these are out of order, but it's not a problem. We can take our levels of achievement. I'll take fair and I'll move it next to novice, and then I'll select deficient and I'll move it next to fair. And then I can submit that. And now you can see that I have all of my columns here. I can do the same thing for adding rows. Let's add one more row here. And I don't know, let's call this correctness, or yeah, let's just call it that for now. This is just an example of answer. We can save this. Now you'll notice that we'll have to assign a point value. Why don't we just balance this, since this is just an example? So now you can see that each of these rows has balanced out to 25%. We'll go ahead and save. It says at least one cell in a row must equal 100%. And you'll notice that that's a problem because it's trying to tell me that this correctness of answer doesn't have one. In fact, since we're at this, let's go ahead and just change these. I'm going to set competent at a 90% level, fair at an 80% level, novice at a 70% level, and if you fall below that, I'll just set this at 0 for our deficients for now. You can set this up any way that meets your particular needs. You'll also notice as I'm doing this that I'm entering these in percentages currently. We don't have to necessarily work in percentages with this. We could work in a points-based system. It really is not that big of a deal because at the end of the day, Blackboard will do most of the calculations and the layout for us. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second with that. So here's the upper area where we can select percentage range, percentage, point range, points, or no points. And those are all of your options to choose from. I'd encourage you to experiment with those and see what works best for you in your exact example. My personal feeling is that probably point range or percentage range is going to be the best for most people. If I select this, just so you can see this, it tells us in terms of points, maybe we go from 100 points, or 90 points to, actually 91 to 100 points. Maybe under competent, you go 90 points to, I'm going to keep messing this up each time, 81 points to 90. And we could continue to do this. I'm not actually going to take the time to fill this out in this example video. But when you're completed with this, you would hit submit. I'm going to go ahead and just put this back to percentage and let it do its original default. Okay, this is just an example. When we're done, we submit. Now, a couple things I want to draw your attention to. We're still not done here. Things I want you to see are underneath grading. We've added the rubric at this point. We can preview the rubric by selecting this little box here. And this is going to show us what our rubric would look like. Keep in mind, I haven't written any of the criteria based on what these are for. We'll look at that in another video. I can always edit the rubric after the fact by selecting the next button. We're not going to do that right now. But what I really want you to see is over here where it says show rubric to students. This is of course at your discretion, but I normally like to go ahead and show this rubric with scores. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to yes with scores. And then I'm going to submit this. I'm going to do that so that when I go into the student preview version, you can see what this will look like as a student. So let's take a look. If the student selects the assignment, they'll have the ability to view it, but if they select on View Rubric, you'll notice that the students get a view of the rubric on this. Now keep in mind that if you look at these point values here, we weighted these 4 criteria at 25%. So the maximum value you can earn under the proficient column is 25%. Remember that I weighted competent at 90%. So assuming that this is all broken down, 22.5 would be the cutoff for 90%, and it does this for you in the software. We did 80% as fair, so here's our fair. 70% we set to novice, and on a 100-point scale that would be 17.5 points in this category. So I just want you to see what it's doing and understand that. Like I said, in the next upcoming video I'll show you how to fill in some of the criteria. I hope that you found this tutorial useful. For more information on how to work with rubrics, please visit us at the Faculty Center for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning. And also feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel.